Brad Knight, and where are you from? Yeah. Yes. So you were, did you bring the auto harp?
Somebody else.
Oh. Oh, there we go. That's why I recognize the name. That's great. And what's your name? Oh, hi, Jennifer. We finally meet. All right. And of course, I know John Dewey from Suffolk, and Deb Quintel from CALI. Yeah. No, this was sort of a last-minute session in some ways because the speaker that was going to be doing the Chinese distance ed needed to be moved to Saturday. And I took it as an opportunity to be able to talk about things that CALI are doing to people who may not know much about us, which is why it's called Behind the Scenes at CALI. All right? My speaking style is such that if you have questions at any time, please interrupt, and I'll even use that as a tangent, an opportunity to go off on a tangent on other things that are going on. So that's to say I've got probably 3 hours worth of material to cover, and so I'm going to be sort of cutting and slicing and dicing as I go. No, that's not true. I have certainly enough material to cover for the hour, but I'm willing to sort of tailor to whatever needs, or questions you folks might have. All right? All right, behind the scenes at CALI. Quick agenda. What is CALI? I promise that will be mercifully short. What are CALI lessons? That will not be so short, but how are they built is what I want to talk about. I want to show you some of the guts or underneath the hood sort of pieces that go into our production process. And then I'd like to leave the last 45 minutes of the talk for current and future CALI projects because those, to me, are the most interesting things, and I'd love feedback. I'd love to talk to you about those things. All right? So what is CALI? Here's our membership recently, sort of the recent graph, 185 U.S. law schools. There's a few holdouts, which we don't have any blackmail to force them to become members. But that's represents about 95% of all law schools in the U.S. We're also getting an increasing number of international affiliates. Signed up 10 Dutch law schools last year. That's all of them. And we've picked up a few in Australia as well, and starting to attract their interest. It's harder to attract international schools because they don't want they only partially want our lessons. They really want access to the software and access to the technology, law school technology community. This is my favorite graph. That should say, right. 2004, the number's not going to be 350. I forgot to change that. It's going to be 300. But the steepness of the graph is because we changed our production model for how we create new materials. So CALI sort of went along for about 18, 15 years, up around 100 lessons. John and Deb showed up in 200 new lessons in the last 3 years. All right? Yes, I'm taking credit for that. Yes, we're taking credit for that. We distribute our CD free to your 1Ls. If you didn't know that, you can still go to our website and order CDs for all of your 1Ls for free. After that, $1 a CD for your 2 and 3Ls, which is basically cost for us. It's classic AOL carpet bombing with CDs, and we find that it drives usage, and students write us to tell us how wonderful and convenient it is. So lots of CDs being blasted around. We sponsor the Excellence for the Future Award. How many lawyers? Of course, Jennifer's a lawyer. Are you a lawyer? Lawyer? No? Okay. And are you a lawyer? No. Then you wouldn't know about something called the Book Award or the Amger Award. It goes back, I don't know how far back it goes, but Lawyers Cooperative Publishing used to give an award to the student who got the highest grade in the class, and they used to give them a free copy of the American Jurisprudence Encyclopedia. And so it was called the Book Award. And it became a verb. Students would say, I amgered that class, meaning I got the highest grade. Well, they discontinued that program about 4 or 5 years ago, and we stepped in and created something called the Excellence for the Future Award. And I'm happy to say that a couple of years ago, I heard some students walking down the hall saying, so how'd you do in that class? Well, I CALI'd it. So CALI's now a verb. And we do about 20,000 of those awards a year. course, we sponsor some conference that I don't know much about. And so let's talk about CALI lessons. All right. The way we build lessons these days is through fellowships. And our most recent set of fellows starts Saturday, 5 each in trademark, 5 and 6, or 6 and 5 in trademark and remedies. And we look for very experienced teachers because we want them to imbue their lessons with their experience in how students learn or how students sort of run into the material and bounce back from it. That is to say, they know where the potholes are. And so we want them to put into the lessons where those potholes are so that the lesson is sort of a pre-programmed or a captured small dialogue or mini Socratic dialogue, we like to call it. I'll show you a little bit more about that in a second. This year, 2003, trademarks and remedies. Next year, maybe copyrights and bankruptcy, were we thinking? Or wills and trusts. But we're tinkering with that. You know, with the goal of basically marching our way through the entire law school sort of syllabus, you know, so that we have lots of materials. Whoops. Now, it used to be we'd hand a pile of money, or we'd bring a faculty member in and say, write a lesson for us, and they would want to write a lesson called property, or evidence, or something like that. It would take them months, almost over a year, to write that lesson, and sometimes it wasn't that good at the end of that year, but we'd wasted that year, all right? Because if they were new to authoring, and faculty sometimes don't like to share interim drafts of things. No, let me get it to a point where I feel comfortable sharing it with you. All right? So we decided to break up the production cycle, the production of lessons, into smaller pieces, or lessonettes is what we call them. And that means we want them to write small lessons that cover somewhere between 15 and 40 minutes of student seat time. So that could mean a lot. That could mean 20 to 40 or 20 to 60 screens of information that they're creating. But the point of it is the title of the lesson is longer because it focuses more narrowly on a shorter topic. I'll explain that in a second. There's lots of review in this. In other words, after they write one small lessonette, which shouldn't take them more than a couple of weeks or a month, then they get feedback from us. Yes, you're on track. Oops, that's not what we were looking for. All right? Because we have experience in this. And so the quality of the materials that they produce, instead of that quality line following the one lesson, where the first half of the lesson is you could tell they were learning, and in the back half of the lesson they actually figured it out. Well, the first, by the middle of the second lessonette, they're solidly understanding how to write very high quality electronic teaching materials. So every review, at least with the fellowships process, is an internal review by people who are experts at this, namely Deb Quintel, and that expertise comes from experience of looking at lots of materials. It's hard to be objective. It's hard to have quantifiable ways of defining what is a good teaching material. We do keep up on our reading on instructional design, but instructional design doesn't necessarily hand you a perfect roadmap for creating excellent materials. There's so much variability in the types of students that come to it, the way teachers teach, the goals of the course, whether they're top-tier law school Harvard students or whether they're students from other schools that are struggling with law school. There's a lot of variables there. The fellows review each other's materials anonymously. And that's always interesting. And then we have an editorial board called the CALI editorial board, and they review the lessons anonymously. So there's 2 levels of peer review, almost 3 levels of peer review to do our quality control on our materials. And that happens on every single lesson that we publish. So instead of having a lesson called property, or even a lesson called adverse possession, we might have 8, actually I think we have 7 or 8 lessons in the adverse possession area. Adverse possession introduction, adverse possession color title. I'm not going to read those to you. The point being, the materials is very fine-grained, hopefully down to a logic with logical boundaries. In other words, this makes sense to teach in one lesson. and with the intent that the student can sit down and finish it without saying, well, I'll come back to this because this is taking a long time. You know, it's one sort of seat version of that. Hello. Now that that blue thing that's up on the screen is something that we call our topic grid, because in order to parse the material to hand assignments to the fellows, we needed to create essentially, sort of a new taxonomy, which is what I would call sort of a teaching jargon taxonomy, and that's what the grids are. They're the statements that faculty use when they say in the hall, "What are you teaching today?" "Oh, I'm teaching rap," or rap analysis, rule against perpetuities, or "I'm teaching, actus reus," or "I'm teaching mens rea," or "I'm teaching." It's what the faculty use to describe a particular topic point that we hope eventually becomes the title of the lessonettes. So subject might be something like criminal law or property, and then further and further breakdowns. All right? We had to sort of invent our own taxonomy that we cull from people's syllabi, from the tables of contents of casebooks, and also working directly with the fellows. They get handed a very early draft of this, and by the time the fellowship is over, it's been reworked by them into something that hopefully is very recognizable to all faculty who teach in that area. So during the fellowship, the faculty basically work their way through the points, creating lessonettes for various points. All right, so you can sort of see where we're going. What we hope to have is a large collection of materials, not just lessonettes, but we're looking at ways that we create multimedia materials as well, video and graphics. And so a professor might come to our materials and say, well, I want to cherry pick what I want. And since the materials are small enough and granular enough, they can safely do that. Because if they teach it in a different order than the instructor down the hall, well, that's just a matter of rearrangement. All right? And so they may pick those things and put that on their syllabus. Another professor might come along with a completely different approach and pick completely different collections of materials and put that on their syllabus. All right? Even better, a student who just sort of ran across CALI lessons or got one of our CDs and is having problems or wants some additional help will come to our website and self-select the materials that they want to see, typically the night before the final exam. And decide, well, I want to see this, I want to see this, I want to see this. All right? And that's the goal, basically, of having a large collection of material that's, very finely grained. All right? That's the sort of 5,000-mile viewpoint. Now I'm going to dive down into a particular, how we build an individual lesson. Now, can't see the bottom there, but it says Nintendoing. If all our authors did was write lessons that were multiple choice question, followed by multiple choice question, followed by multiple choice question, that would be bad. Those are bad lessons. They're boring, and students tend to sit there and click until they see green. All right? They're not bad quizzes. They're not bad reviews of material necessarily, but they're not what we're trying to build. All right? We're not trying to build quizzes or relatively simple-minded reviews. All right? Remember how that we wanted that sort of dialogue action happening. Right? What we want is something where a question gets asked, and then if the student gets it right, it might be a situation where it was a hard question, and if the student got it right, we'll skip over a bunch of stuff. All right, you're obviously an expert at this, so we're gonna skip over the remedial material and go right and get right into the hard stuff. All right. Some faculty, though, since they're not there, you are pre-programming this. Some faculty will ask a hard question. If the student gets it right, just to make sure, they'll say, "Did you guess?" And if the student says yes, then they'll say, "Well, thanks for being honest," and jump them right back up to question 2 there, and run them through the remedial material. Because quite often, in a multiple choice situation, students will just bounce around, right? All right. You might have a situation where if they get it right, they continue down a path. If they get it wrong, you have to do some backfill. Oh, man, they got an easy one wrong. I better go back over the definitions of some of these things. All right? That makes our materials hopefully more applicable to a broader audience. All right? This is my favorite. I like the one where if the author asks a question, and if the student gets it right, they still say, well, did you consider, and what about, and are you sure, and all sorts of things that sort of throw them off, which is classic sort of Socratic dialogue teaching. And I call that stick to your guns, because the student has to like hold to their conviction all the way through those questions, and then they're rewarded by jumping back. If they say, oh, okay, you're right, I don't want to stick to my guns. Oh, no, you should have stuck to your guns. Something like that. All right? So that's what's inside of lessons, is hopefully a collection of those little Socratic dialogues that are instantiated as multiple choice questions, or type in answers, or draw lines to connect things. We have lots of sort of different mechanical ways to ask questions in lots of different ways. I'll show you a few of them. Collected by the expertise of the teacher who knows how to construct these things into the lesson, and then published as a small granular unit that is easily found, or hopefully easily slotted into a syllabus or into a learning situation. All right, how are they built? Well, let's do this. I need to actually exit out of this and start up CALI Author. I used to be a programmer, or I'm sort of a programmer. No, I'm a programmer. Boy, I can't believe I said that. I'm a programmer. And the thought of law faculty, especially the old white-haired guys, learning to program, something like, Toolbook or a scripting language or JavaScript or Flash, just is insane. It's too complicated. It's too much to expect them to become expertise in. Because then not only would they have to learn how to be a programmer, they would have to learn how to be a little bit of an instructional designer, a little bit of a graphic artist, a little bit of lots of different things. And so the choices for creating materials is you give them a programmer, somebody in their school or somebody that they can connect with, who will say, can you make it do this, can you make it do this, can you make it do this? And a lot of our earlier lessons were built that way, programmer-author pairs, teams. The problem with that is those were hand-coded, each one, in various languages, Pascal, C, Toolbook, and things like that. And they don't run very well on modern-day computers, and not at all on the web. And so to convert them into something that will run is another hand-coding process. What we need is a way to separate the content of the lesson from the player that plays it, so that it can be repurposed in multiple operating environments, be that web or standalone PC, or be that different operating systems like Mac and things like that. Second, we needed something that we could hand to a law professor, and after an hour or so they could say, oh, I could do this. In other words, not much harder than a word processor, or where their technological literacy is, which is to say filling out forms on the web or email, those sorts of things. And so we bit the bullet quite a few years ago and said we must write our own, because there is nothing out there that's that easy to use. And it's called CALI Author. What a clever name. I had one sort of queued. What was I going to open? I wanted BO2. Is that it? BO2? There it is. Yes, I would. All right. Some of the early versions of CALI Author, we had an internal name for it. It was called ZenCal. It was called ZenCal because the tagline was, it's not what it does, it's what it doesn't do. And that's because it doesn't let you change fonts or play around with the user interface or be very graphically or multimedia creative. Right? We didn't want faculty doing that. If they wanted to do something that was like that, well, then they should go get a programmer for this. What we needed to do, though, was have sort of an engine or a machine that would produce a lot of materials, to satisfy our membership. And we needed a sort of a modicum of homogeneity. Homogeneity, I said it right. It needed to be homogeneous somewhat. Not too cookie cutter, though. So there was a balance there. So when you open up a lesson, you'll see the names of the authors, and you also see a description of the lesson. But I'm not only running a lesson. In other words, I'm not only running a piece of software that is running a lesson, I'm also running the authoring system. The two are one and the same. I press the magic F3 key, and now I'm looking at this lesson as though I'm the author. Now, you can't do that with our lessons on the CD. There's a password there. But I've taken the password off of this lesson just for this purpose. All right? Now, the screen is basically split into two panes. On the left side, it looks a little bit like Explorer there. On the left side is sort of a list of all of the screens or the question pages that the author has created. And in this case, I'm in the tab where the right side is what the student sees. All right? Sort of like a picture-in-picture situation there. So if I run through the lesson as though I'm a student here, and I click on Introduction, this is a text screen. I'm not going to expect you to read these. I'm just going to sort of move by this. You'll see that on the left side, I'm proceeding through the outline, while on the right side, I'm actually seeing the individual questions. All right. Now this is an example of a multiple choice question. Now here's the thing: that branching that I talked about, the ability to go left or right, depending on right or wrong, you can't represent that graphically with just an outline like that. All right? And so this important concept that we wanted to get across to our authors, that we want this sort of three-dimensional feel to it. They couldn't see it. We could draw it on a napkin. It was sort of like flowcharting, but I hate to use that because it sounds too techy for them. All right? So we built a feature into a couple of versions ago of CALI Author. I'm going to slide that over so that you can see more of it. Called the mapper. And what it does is it actually draws a flow chart of the lesson. All right. I'll zoom that down a little bit. You'll see that this guy's highlighted because that's the screen I'm currently on. And now I'm going to scroll down and actually answer one of these questions. Now here I can see that, it's a little hard to see that, but I can see that A, B, and C, and D are all wrong because they're all red. And E is right. It takes me to the next screen, which is this one. So let's go choose E. What happens is you get a pop-up, which is your feedback. We encourage our authors not to just say right, wrong, maybe, but to be right, why, wrong, because. And to repeat these sometimes if it's sort of a standalone question in all of the feedbacks. Because you can't guarantee that the student's going to see only the right answer. Right? And it's an opportunity to learn when they get the wrong answer. All right. So I click continue, and I've gone to the next question there. You can see there, and so on. Now, an example of that branching that I was just talking about, maybe this is a bad example. I thought I was looking at this one last night for just this reason. Corp 12? All right. You know as an example for that, you know the name of it? Sorry? No, do you know the name of the lesson? Because I don't have the numberings here.
Try section 16B of Securities Exchange Act.
All right. Yeah, this will be all right, I'll bet. Yeah, Steve Bradford's got a lot of that. There's a good example. All right, let's zoom up on that. So again, the actual details of this are unimportant to those of us who don't know business organizations or corporations law. But it shows the model that we're trying to demonstrate. There's a question, it's the next one here. There's a question where there's actually no wrong answer. There's one right answer and one maybe. Of course, we had to invent the maybe response for law faculty. And if you get it correct, you go one way. If you get it wrong, you take a very short little detour off on one more question before you come back onto the main path. That's a very simplistic but illustrative point about branching. That's good if it simulates the reality of what happens in the classroom when you're dialoguing with your students. And that's the point. And that's why we had to build CALI Author ourselves so that we could model this behavior so that the faculty author could see that. They don't build this flowchart like by drawing it. The flowchart is automatically built from them creating individual text pages and filling in, and connecting up the links. Right? Now, another killer feature or important feature of this is that what you just saw was me running a lesson in local mode. It's basically Visual Basic. All right. Well, it takes a long time. CALI Author is about 9 megabytes. It takes a long time to download it. And what we wanted to do was also be able to run our lessons off the internet directly. So this has an export feature which will dump lessons into a huge collection of HTML and JavaScript pages that look different but are functionally identical or functionally awfully close to the lessons that you just saw. So here's the same lesson, except I'm running it basically inside of a web browser, as you can see. All right, let me get to a multiple choice question here. Actually, this is a good one with the use the alternate layout. This is one where we use DHTML to draw lines where you connect things up, except DHTML is kind of flaky in some browsers. So we have a way to show the same interaction using an alternate layout as a series of radio buttons. That illustrates a point. This is our past. Our future is a flash version of all of our lessons, a viewer that will read the lessons. Oh, I need to almost back up a little bit. When you create a lesson in CALI Author, what you are actually creating on the disk is a text file. It's an XML file, all right, with the meta tagging for the page. In other words, we know where the question and the answer and which is right and things like that. All right. So now that we've separated presentation from content, we're in the process now of so the Visual Basic version of CALI Author is a player that reads in the XML file and then displays it locally. The JavaScript version doesn't read the XML file but it is produced from within. It's a combination of the XML file with a series of JavaScript templates to produce sort of a permanent copy or a web version. The Flash version, which is in beta test right now, should be ready in a couple of months, we hope. The Flash version will basically be a CALI Author player that will read the XML file in, and then play it, but albeit with all the benefits of Flash, which is to say cross-platform, cross-browser, resizable to any screen resolution. All of those problems that you can't do easily with DHTML JavaScript these days. All right? So pretty excited about that. Any questions so far? I can come back to that if you want to talk about that a little bit more. Because what I really want to do is talk about current and future projects. All right? More vaporware. No, these are going to happen, but they're not ready for prime time. Actually, I'll start with the internationalization, one aspect of them, because I can do that real quick within CALI Author. Where does that? All right. Because of our work with the Dutch and others, we've recently added a feature where is my feature? My language feature. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I just went right by it 3 times. Yeah, we actually have built into CALI Author now Dutch, French, German, Italian, and Netherlands is the same as Dutch. I think we did that because they were getting confused about what we call it. They probably both point to the same one. And we'll be adding Spanish and a few others pretty soon. But let's go to German. I've never looked at the German one. And by basically within the program clicking a choice, now all of my menu options you see are all in German. All right? Obviously, it doesn't change the lesson content into German. It can't know that or do that. But a German-only speaking author would be able to download this program and then create lessons and things. And that's because we're trying to reach out to the larger law school community, Europe, South America, Asia, and so on, and form alliances that will benefit both of us. Second, there's an awful lot of law schools that have international programs or send students overseas and vice versa. And so there's a lot of interest in being able to speak those people's languages. All right? Let me talk about seating chart. Oh, that's not it. That's not it. Yeah, that's it. A seating chart. The idea behind seating chart is a lot. It's a bunch of. It's a collection of ideas that we think we can grow into something quite intriguing. First of all, it's a paint program that lets you paint classrooms. And what I mean by that is create a piece of paper that has all of the chairs sort of in the right place, whether they're this type of thing or whether it's a curved classroom, you just curve down like that. Right? What you're seeing are not actual software screens, but mock-ups of the interface design that have been handed over to a consultant who swore he would have something to show me before this conference, but then he got hit by a bus, I think. But it's still you get the idea there. All right? So you would basically paint your seats on there so that you can create a blank template of a classroom, sort of like this. And the idea is you would do it. And you wouldn't have to do it with like Visio or SmartDraw or cut and paste or something. All right, that's step one. The next step after that is, if you wanted to point, you would save this as a template, by the way. All right. Now, during the course of a semester, there might be 20 different classes in this room. Right? Because a classroom is used by lots of different people. And it would be nice if you could hand to the instructor this same template so that he could, on paper, so that he could just write in the names of the students, for instance. All right, that's a no-brainer. You just photocopy this. So it helps you in that very little way. But, geez, makes sense that if you have a piece of software that already shows where the seats are, why not let the instructor type the names in? Or even better, since almost all of us now take pictures of our students for their IDs and grab them, what if we could point this piece of software at a subdirectory that had a collection of photos and maybe some sort of text list with the names and the name of the photo file, and then suck them in and create a photo seating chart. So something, scary like that. There's like lots of scary Johns there. Here, let's go zooming in. Oh, even more Johns. There we go. I like that one the best. Yes, what we all want is a classroom full of Johns. Now, the little thing in the lower right-hand corner there, we call that the zoom box. And I need to go up to here to show you sort of like how it works. The idea being is you click on the little plus and minus magnifying glasses, the little red outline shrinks down, and what's being displayed, expands up. And that way you can zoom in if you have a classroom of 200 people, well, you can zoom in and see those individual people's names. All right. So it would be cool if you could save this, print this, hand it to a faculty member as a flash thing. Now I've got a photo seating chart. There's socialization aspects there. If they can see the photos of the students along with the names as soon as possible, they start learning the names. The students feel like they're part of a community. There's very real things there. What's unusual is software is helping them do that. All right. The next step up from this is, now that I've got a photo seating chart of the students in a software program, why not put a database behind it or a communication system behind it? So the students show up, and either the instructor goes through the photo saying, here, in other words, taking attendance, or I hope you're thinking faster than I am here, but the student log in and check themselves in. I'm here. All right? Maybe even using something like, if you're going to go see e-instruction, the fellow's presentation today, or stop by their booth and see a demo of that. They're using little infrared remotes, little $10 TV remotes, and a little device that plugs into the back of the serial port. right? And you can imagine that being used, or in the near future, people's text message, cell phones being used. Yeah, I'm here, or whatever the code is for that sort of thing. All right. If all it did was attendance, that's kind of neat, but still, think further. What if you asked questions in class and said, well, so is it, how many think that the court made a good decision in this situation? And you don't just ask it rhetorically. You say, log your answers. And what that means is the students press A, I think it was a good idea, B, I think it was a bad idea. All right? And the instructor can see that. Now, I don't have a slide for that because we haven't gotten that far in our design. The instructor would be able to see that as the backlighting of the photo being green or red, or some color or some indicator like that. All right. Now, take this another step further. Let's say the instructor can filter those responses over several weeks of the course to say, show me the people that haven't responded much. The low participators, because I want to nail them. Or only show me, I want to move this class forward, so show me my stars, the people that always raise their hand, or the people that always respond, or the people that always get it right. Or whatever you can imagine, whatever sort of subjective criteria they might want to use to filter. With everything being saved as you go along. It's a little Big Brother-like, but it's also a little instantaneous feedback for the faculty member on how well people are doing. Right? Because if you ask a rhetorical question and everybody gets it wrong, then maybe the explanation you gave prior to asking that question, didn't get through, didn't cut through. And if a tool like this were available, that's hopefully really convenient to use. It can't be clunky, and the faculty member sitting there having to type all the time. It's just going to be rejected out of hand. But if the students are driving it and it's just being stored and then being represented back, the data to the instructor, well, then that's killer, or that's very powerful, and that's something that can be used in the classroom that justifies the use of projection systems and technology, right? And hopefully it improves the quality of the teaching as well in the learning. Any questions? So hopefully we will have something to show on this in the near future. All right. The second thing that I wanted to talk about, the other thing is something we call A2J author. All right. There is a crisis in legal representation. All right. I joined AALL a couple of years ago, and I joined the state and county law librarians list. And I saw a bunch of material go by in the last few months, where basically, I'll greatly paraphrase, lawyers aren't coming to their libraries in as much anymore. They're staying home or in the firm and going online. So a huge decrease in the number of lawyer bodies walking into state and county law libraries, and a tremendous, 300% increase in the number of what they call SRLs showing up, self-representing litigants. People saying, I have a legal problem, I'm going to solve it myself, because either I think I should, or those lawyers are too damn expensive, or whatever the reason. And they're, of course, asking librarians, well, where do I go to find out about this? And librarians are not allowed to give legal advice, of course. Well, there's a huge explosion of that. And there's of course, there's the Legal Services Corporation and public interest law firms or groups that serve the poor or immigrant or minority populations, but they're massively overworked. Well, during Ron Stout and Todd Pedwell at Chicago Kent got a grant to study the problem a couple of years back, and one of the solutions they came up with was sort of it should be a but it has a sort of a twist to it, and that was, well, maybe some of these people can get their forms filled out on the web, without having to go to a lawyer. All right, that's easy. Right? But the twist on that was they looked at how people fill out forms, and they looked at the people that most need to use this, and they tend to be English as a second language and not graduates of high school, and therefore not necessarily very familiar with the web. Even simple forms can be quite intimidating. So one of the things they did as a project was to design a web-based interface that they hoped was a lot less intimidating. Right? It's a little bit TurboTax, like that interview mode. It's a little bit Flash. Matter of fact, eventually, hopefully, it's written in Flash. And it's a little bit sort of video game with a sort of a path and a goal. It never asks more than a question or two per page. I'm going to say yes. It's also visual as well as oral, so that you can hear it. The theory behind that is you could speak different languages if you wanted to do that. All right. I'm going to just. No, this is not particularly impressive at this point because it's just web forms, all right? And that's not what I want to do. Yeah, no, this is a big problem if they don't have one already, which I don't have mine set up for this. But the problem here is this one, which is for joint separate dissolution of a marriage, apparently a very simple divorce and only requires a few forms and a little bit of information. Took several months to hand code. Now, the next one won't take several months, but it will take several weeks. But there are not dozens, but hundreds and maybe thousands of forms that they would like to automate. And then there are 50 states. And so they'd like to take those forms and use them as a library that they can move to other states easily. Well, if you're going to hand code all of those, you're going to die before you finish. So what we need is sort of a production engine for these types of things. And the idea there is access to justice author. Where am I? A2J author. And A2J author would be built on the CALI author engine. So much like law faculty build lessons that take students through paths of learning, public interest lawyers would build dialogues that take self-represented litigants through paths, except the only difference is instead of just clicking yes or no and moving on for a learning purpose, they're clicking yes and no, and we're saving that because that's an answer to a question that's going to be used to fill in a form. All right? This is a little hard to blow up to the right size. But basically, the idea is the lawyer there, 1 and 2, creates a form using either hot docs or some other document assembly system. And as part of this project, we've got Lexis to donate hot docs for this. And they also create this A2J interface, essentially creating the dialogues that appear in those little boxes, and the software will generate the path going down for the self-represented litigant to follow. All right? They upload that up to the up to a server. Scratch that down. They upload that to a server. Oops, let's right-click that. Right-click that. See, that's the problem. I'm stuck like in a midway limbo there. And a self-representing or a pro se user comes there, walks through that interface, which they have a higher rate of. This is by usability tests that we've done. They have a higher percentage rate of completion of this interface than of even normal web forms. And it would be easy to just shut this down and go right to a web form that's just like, here's all the fields we need. Right? They walk through that. It would dump the information off to a back-end database to save it if they want to come back later, of course, behind the password. And then it would dump the results off to the document assembly engine, which would take their information, insert it into the pre-made templates, and theoretically serve back to them either an RTF or, if it's a kiosk-like situation, a printer, a filled-out legal form that all they need to do is sign. All right? And if it's done in something like an authoring environment, like A2J, then we get a couple of public interest lawyers who crank out a couple of forms, a couple of dozen forms. And it's easy to just take those and share them with other states and say, What's the difference between Indiana and Illinois? Make the changes in that. Because again, it's a separation of content from presentation. All right? Sounds like a no-brainer, right? But nobody's done it, and it's tremendously exciting. And the people that I've told about working on this project, immediately get like this: "Give me! When can we have it?" Because they see it as it's certainly not going to solve all the legal representation problems, but it's about time somebody came along and sort of systematized this thing, so that at least the system can handle a greater number of people with. The thing about lawyering, and I'm not a lawyer, and so this might sound stupid to the lawyers, the thing I see about lawyering is an awful lot of it is sort of rote, right? Sort of can be done with paperwork and things. The problem is 10% of it can't be, and it requires an expert to jump in and say, wait a minute, make sure you get this right, otherwise, people die, lives get lost, or something like that. And it's very hard to tell the difference between that 90 and that 10%, that triage part, all right? And so it might be that this will require a person up front to say, no, this is a normal fill out a form sort of situation, or this is something that requires expertise at a different level. But at this point in time, self-representing litigants aren't getting any help whatsoever, and so I'm tending to believe something is better than nothing. And since the idea behind this is to build it inside of CALI Authors Engine, well, hopefully you can make the leap to say, as they're filling out this form, if they're interested in learning about something behind it, like, well, why are they asking me that question, or what statute is that in? You could have something there that goes off into what is essentially a very short little educational lesson on the law, except it's aimed at a self-represented litigant, not at a law student. All right? So that makes it quite consistent with CALI's mission. We're providing legal education, just sort of to a different world. We believe that there are also possibilities of using this in clinic situations. You can imagine clinical teachers having their students write access to justice, A to J, form filling out templates, and then sharing them with students down the line so that they are more efficient in their representation of clients in their clinics. All right? And so that's also a teaching opportunity for us. All right? So there's about 10 minutes left, and that's all I wanted to say about behind the scenes at CALI. I hope I didn't bore you too much. But if you have any questions or want to talk about anything, you can do that now, or you can always shoot me an email. Frank. Sorry? Franco. Sorry. Oh, yes. Bar foundations, basically. Fortunately, the people I'm working with is in Chicago. One of the we have people who are in the bar foundation who are on the board of directors, and so they're aware of the issues of, is this practicing law or not, and we're stepping carefully around that or through that and working with the bar associations on that. But I think that's going to be a battle that you'll always fight, especially in Texas. Texas last year, for a brief period of time, outlawed no-low press. They outlawed the sale of a book because they said that book was practicing law. And then the legislature changed it, and now it's okay. But that's how twitchy they were about making sure that nobody represents themselves as a lawyer. I can understand that. On the other hand, I could buy books that explain to me how to remove my own kidney. Is that practicing medicine? Not unless I actually do it, right? But do you see the analogy there? I mean, why can't I at least know about it? Why can't the process attempt to be explained to me in a book, like medicine can be, like all sorts of technologies? So I think that's in my opinion, a fatuous sort of an attempt to protect the public. Or they say to protect the public, but I believe it's trying to protect their monopoly. Right, John? That's okay. You don't have to answer. I know you're in Boston. Okay, they're legal. All right.
The law says they can put a car around the block. Given a number of months, they can have a passenger. So our 16-year-old came, and now it's the world of automotive endeavors. And ask ourselves the question, how many of us, if we owned an Indianapolis race car, would say, let's put the 16-year-old behind the wheel and let that person go at it and more?
Yep.
So, the analogy, but time and again, with problem analysis, there is that one nuance behind the tendency.
Hmm.
The truth of the matter is it might be one. Just one, what might appear to be small and relevant fact can change everything. We can wipe the slate clean. And only, through experience. This is roughly in medicine. Good analogy. No one goes to the doctor. It's not heard of it. You got a problem. Why? Urea, what? On. And you go through a chain of experts. Anybody with a serious problem never sees one or two doctors. A chain of diagnostic experts to get to the solution. A complicated problem, more experts come to the table. And I can understand shooting analysis or approach, very successful one, CALI lesson, breaking down academic subject matter and so forth, and parsing it out, and seeing the construct of the CALI lesson is very, very important. But what you're doing, I think, is you're taking that process of building a CALI lesson as a template and then dropping it onto a whole lot of big systems that will do this computing. I suspect that you're climbing a much larger mountain than you know.
Oh, no. No, you're right. All I'll say in my defense is we know it's a large mountain. And so we realize our initial goals are going to be quite modest, simple forms, and I mean simple forms. Nothing terribly life-threatening if you screw it up, sort of situations.
Language changes in the law of jurisdiction.
Yes.
Exponential nuances make it different.
There are.
At least know enough. It starts falling into the chain. Most lawyers only know a little bit. Know a lot about a little bit. That's what happens to them in practice of work.
Right.
Lose a lot of the stuff that you got in law school. Find one little piece of life that you can make a living at. Get very, very good at it. And then every time somebody trots in something that's outside of your expertise,
You refer it. No, this is going to be tough. But there's all sorts of nuances to our approach that we could pull too. For instance, maybe self-representing litigants don't fill this form out themselves. Maybe this is something that lawyers create for themselves. That they basically say to their client, "Why don't you get started on this, or go here and fill out as much as you can, and then when we get together," so it becomes sort of an interviewing tool, the pre-interview tool, or something like that. Right. No, we've thought about that as well. It might be something that you use to train lawyers with. Here's all the nuances that you need to know about. In other words, not seeing the final thing, but also seeing like the mapper that's behind it. In other words, the mapper that would be behind it is the equivalent of a flowchart of the law or the statute that form is instantiating. The fact that you have to know whether they're over 18 or under 18, and whether they're Right. don't know. I think it'll be fun, and as long as I'm not providing the content, I'm not liable for any of the answers that it puts out, right? Very good. Thank you for coming. Hope you got something. Hope you got a little bit of a behind-the-scene glimpse of CALI's stuff. There's actually a lot more going on, but I wanted to keep this down to only an hour. If you're interested in working with us on some particular project, let me know. We're always trolling for ideas. All right. Thank you.